of this inquiry of public enterprises. Thank you very much to you all that are here and those that are listening from homes. We have Mr. Anoj Singh here as a witness that we have been waiting for since last year. I am told that he is going to speak under oath. Therefore, I'm going to read the oath. Oh. Mr. Singh, I think the copy of the oath is in front of you. Okay, you will sign it after we are done. In accordance with Section 16 of the Powers, Privilege and Immunities of Parliament and Provincial Legislators Act 2004, as a witness to this oversight inquiry, please be informed that by law you are required to answer fully and satisfactorily all the questions lawfully put to you, or to produce any document that you are required to produce in connection with the subject matter of the inquiry, notwithstanding the fact that the answer or the document could incriminate you or expose you to criminal or civil proceedings or damages. I just want to emphasize on that the answers or the document could incriminate you, expose you to criminal or civil proceedings or damages. You are, however, protected in that evidence given under oath or under oath before a house or a committee may not be used against you in any court or place outside Parliament, except in criminal proceedings concerning a charge of perjury or a charge relating to the evidence or documents required in these proceedings. Please be aware that in terms of Section 17, subsection 2 of the Powers, Privilege and Immunities of Parliament and Provincial Legislator Act, a person who willfully furnishes a house or committee with information or makes a statement before it which is false or misleading, commits an offense and is liable to a fine or imprisonment for a period not exceeding 2 years. You are required to take the oath that the evidence that you are about to give is truthful. I would now give over to you to take the oath.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I swear that the evidence I shall give shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help me God.
Thank you very much. You may sign the document. Thank you very much for signing the oath. You will give it over to the staff members, or they will come and take it to, by you. Honorable Vanara, you, Advocate Vanara, I will now give over to you to lead us in this inquiry. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon to yourself, the honorable members, and the guests of the committee, as well as colleagues. Mr. Singh, can you, for the record, just state your full names?
My name is Anoj Singh.
Mr. Singh, sorry, Advocate. Mr. Singh, could you please speak to the mic? Try to remove the things that makes you not to be audible.
You have prepared and submitted a submission to the committee. And I think you can take it that the submission has been read, that you did not have to go through the 400 or so page document that you had prepared. I think we had an engagement with your legal team that you will be afforded 30 minutes just to take the committee through the salient features in your submission before we can engage, and then the committee will engage with you. Thank you. You may proceed.
Thank you, Advocate. Thank you for the opportunity to present to the Portfolio Committee today. It is thus far the only opportunity that I've been afforded to present my version of the events on the particular transactions that have been requested by the committee to be reviewed. At the outset, I would like to apologize for the late submission of the documents in December 2017. I believe it was in the best interests of the committee and its given objectives to have a comprehensive response dealing factually with all of the issues at hand. It was not my intention to derail or disrespect the committee or its work in any way. It's obviously not my first time to Parliament, so I do understand the seriousness with which we need to take these proceedings. To this end, I have some additional information relating to the McKinsey and Trillion transaction, but have decided not to submit that to the committee at this stage in the fear of repeating the events of December. But I'm quite happy and willing to provide that information to the evidence leader and the committee subsequent to this session today. Also, just a further apology in terms of the statement that I have submitted. Just some erratums. Paragraph 164 is actually in the wrong place and should actually be between paragraphs 105 and 106. Second point is that paragraph 147, the word trillion should have been replaced with Eskom.
Sorry, Mr. Singh.
Yes, sir.
Can you just go
on the corrections? Okay. On the corrections to the statement, paragraphs 146 is in the wrong place. Oh, sorry, 146. No, let me just check it quickly.
Honorable members, he's trying to correct the numbers that he has twisted, 164 and 146. Give him chance to give us the correct number. Is it 146 or is it 164?
Madam Chair, it is 146. Sorry if I did say 164. So it's paragraph 146 that is in the wrong place, and it should be in between paragraphs 105 and 106. The second one is paragraph 147. The fourth last word in that second sentence refers to trillion. It should not be trillion, it should actually be Eskom.
Can you read the whole paragraph, the 147, so that we make the correct changes?
Will do, ma'am. 147, the correct version should read as follows. The membership was finalized in January 2016 as per one of the conditions precedent in the contract signed between McKinsey and Eskom. So trillion should be replaced with Eskom in January 2016. Thank you, Madam Chair, for allowing me those opening comments. In accordance with Advocate Varana's guidance, I will not go through each of the pages of the statement, but basically just highlight certain areas that I think that are relevant to the committee. I think in terms of the roles and responsibilities of the CFO, I think we are relatively comfortable that financial management of the company is one of them. Company performance monitoring and reporting is another important area. Funding and liquidity management, performance monitoring, reporting and mitigating actions, financial risk management, performance monitoring and mitigating actions. A big portion of my role when I was at Eskom was around...
So, Mr. Singh, can you just because you're not reading verbatim, you will be skipping.
Okay.
Just point out the paragraph and the page at which you are so that we could follow you.
No problem. Thank you. Will do. Sorry, members. I am on page 5 of the statement, paragraph 15. Sorry, section 1. Paragraph 15, page 5. Moving on to page 6. A big portion of my role in Eskom was to spend time on the tariffs and the regulatory compliance with NERSA. Another area was the credit rating agencies, performance monitoring, reporting and mitigating actions, maintaining and monitoring the financial control environment, corporate plan development and strategic direction setting and alignment, and shareholder communication and alignment. Paragraph 16 is also quite an important paragraph in my view, in that it creates the environment and the context within which most of these decisions that we are currently reviewing today were made, which is by and large the environment that I found myself in when I got there in August 2015. We had a new board, we had a new chairman, we had a new group chief executive. Numerous exco positions were occupied by acting individuals. The organization effectively was directionless and leaderless, which was exacerbated by the poorly constructed corporate plan for 2015-16. We all remember the load shedding crisis that existed at the time. And this was as a result of the poor generation of plant performance, which had an EAF at the time of 69%. Diesel usage was at an all-time high of approximately 1 billion a month.
I'm extremely sorry to interrupt you, but you see, you're not speaking to people that understand the language at Eskom.
Okay, sorry.
So where you use abbreviations, please just explain those to the committee.
Sure. EAF stands for Energy Availability Factor. So this is the amount of energy that's available from the active plant at the time, was 69%. So of all of Eskom's plant and power stations, effectively only produced energy at 69% of the time. Diesel usage was an all-time high, probably approximately 1 billion per month. Spiraling cost of primary energy, cost of coal and diesel, approximately 18% per annum over the last 5 years. There was a liquidity crisis, particularly in December 2014 and January 2015, which the Minister of Public Enterprises was made aware of. All three credit rating agencies at the time had downgraded Eskom. The tariff decision was rejected by NERSA at the time, and the relationship relatively with NERSA was quite poor. The new build program was significantly behind schedule. A significant portion of the new build program was unfunded due to the spiraling costs on the projects. Financial performance of the organization was relatively poor, and financial sustainability was and still is in question. Credibility of information provided by Eskom to stakeholders was questionable. Negotiations with National Treasury for the equity injection at the time was ongoing. You will recall that was an amount of 23 billion. There was a relatively gun-to-the-head attitude from suppliers at the time, particularly the primary energy suppliers or coal suppliers. Lastly, everything needed to be done yesterday, and everything had to be done yesterday. All this led, I think, to the establishment of a war room by government at the time. I think just as background, I think for the committee on page 8, in order for us to understand the transactions at hand, I gave you a brief outline of the primary energy environment, which is basically the coal environment. Primary energy is by and large coal. Eskom procures, this is paragraph 19.1 on page 8. Eskom procures approximately 120 million tons of coal per annum and is the largest purchaser of coal pretty much in South Africa. That equates to a spend of about 40 to 50 billion rands a year. Most of Eskom's coal supply contracts were concluded without an open tender process being followed. Approximately 40% of the coal is procured from so-called cost-plus mines, which are 40-year contracts and were awarded prior to procurement regulations as we know it today. The balance of Eskom's coal was procured under the so-called medium-term coal mandate or the 2008 coal mandate, which was approved by the Board Tender Committee in 2008, following the shortages of coal in 2008. This mandate allowed for the sourcing of coal without rigorous open tender processes being followed, and 33 contracts and numerous contract extensions were ordered via this mandate. Approximately 500 million tons of coal was procured through the 2008 mandate. Turning over to the next page, page 9. This just gives you a breakdown of spend. 73% of coal is procured from major coal suppliers that are not black-owned, 27% from black-owned suppliers, 6.7% from Tegeta, which is the Tegeta Mining and Resources. The graph on page 9, I think, is also quite relevant in my view. If you look at the graph, what the graph actually shows is that there was quite a significant increase in all sources of coal to Eskom post-2008. And that is a graphical representation of the 18% increase in the cost of coal that I spoke about earlier. The reasons for the increase in coal in 2008, by and large, is reflected on page 10. The higher quality of coal that was required by Eskom increased the cost of coal, firstly. Secondly, when you increase the quality of coal, you then start competing with the export market. And at that time, the export market's cost of coal was actually quite high. And also the poor performance of the cost-plus mines in terms of the volumes that were coming out of the cost-plus mines exacerbated the problem. Major contributors was Exxaro mine, pricing at 1,132 Rand a ton, New Denmark at 642 Rand a ton, and at that time, Optimum was about 150 Rand a ton. Anode supply was between 453 and 470 Rand a ton from Tegeta at the time, realizing a saving of about 1.2 billion. Also exacerbating the cost of coal at the time, which is now paragraph 19.7 on page 10. Sorry, 19.17 on page 10, was the Medupi contract that was concluded with Exxaro. And this is a take-or-pay contract. So basically what that means is that you either need to take the coal, and if you don't have the ability to take the coal, you still have to pay for the coal that you do not take. So because of the delay in the commissioning and completion of the Medupi power station, Eskom obviously didn't have the ability to take the coal when Exxaro had the ability to deliver the coal. And Eskom ended up incurring penalties and having to pay penalties of 11.4 billion. Which in my view, at the time, would have been fruitless and wasteful expenditure in terms of the PFMA. Because of the fact that Eskom had paid this amounts, but had obviously not taken the coal from Exxaro. If we do the math, it does actually make this contract one of the most expensive sources of coal. That's in the second bullet point under paragraph 19.17. On page 11, the last bullet point, if you look at the cost of coal from this contract, the Medupi contract, the effect of the penalties as well as the accrued penalties as well as the amounts that have been paid in cash amount to around 20 billion. And effectively, that 20 billion that we paid to Exxaro in some way, shape or form, in my view, eroded the equity injection that we actually got from government in that year. I think under the governance section, what I would like to cover is probably one of the areas that is of significance to the committee, or I would think would be of significance to the committee, is the tactical or operational level governance, which is outlined on page 13 of the statement. I think the operating model of Eskom, which is outlined in paragraph 30 on that page, is something that is of significance I would think would be of significance to the committee. And it's elaborated further on paragraph 33.1. What had happened is that I think the board and the executive committee in 2010 decided to change the operating model of Eskom from a centralized one to a decentralized one. And I think that allowed for the lack of accountability and responsibility in the environment, because when you change from a centralized to a decentralized, and then effectively to a matrix organization, it allows for the watering down of accountability and responsibility and visibility of that accountability and responsibility. The migration of the operating model that had been undertaken in 2010 was not fully implemented. So you had a portion of the organization that was matrix and a portion of the organization that still existed on the old operating environment. And that is at paragraph 33.4 on page 14. We identified this as one of the weaknesses, and we raised this at an Exco strategic session, and there was overwhelming support to migrate back to a decentralized organization, and an Exco decision was taken to pilot the procurement function on a decentralized basis at that stage, and that's at paragraph 33.5. The next significant factor that impacts operational governance at Eskom, in my view, is that in 2012 or thereabouts, Eskom had decided to re-implement SAP. And in some way, shape or form, I think the re-implementation of SAP did not in its entirety support the operating model that was then envisaged and implemented. And also the version of SAP that was implemented was a relatively vanilla version of SAP, which didn't aid in the optimum controls that were required in the business to support the business processes. I'm given to understand that the SAP implementation was also accompanied by a program called Back to Basics. That's on page 15, paragraph 37. And some of this Back to Basics program also resulted in irregular expenditure of 310 million in the 2015 year. The consequences of the above, which is paragraph 38 of page 15, is a poor control environment for procurement, poor contract management, poor consequence management, and poor document management. The four consequences that I've mentioned in paragraph 39 resulted in the audit qualification that Eskom received at the end of 31 March 2017 financial statements relating to the PFMA note in the financial statements. Some examples of poor contract management, I think that's pretty much the area in which you will find all of these issues that we're dealing with today manifest itself. I've spoken about the Exaro take-or-pay contract in 2008. There was a SHEC contract, which stands for Safety, Health, Environment and Quality contract that was entered in 2006, resulting in irregular expenditure of 2.1 billion and fruitless and wasteful expenditure of 510 million. The Just Coal supply contract for coal was entered into in March 2014, valued at 6 billion. And delivery out of spec coal contract eventually was cancelled by Eskom. There were some deemed energy payments to independent power producers as a result of late connections by Eskom. Probably fruitless and wasteful expenditure, in my view, of about 250 million. Moving on to page 17, there were some enhancements that we have tried to do since April 2016, but that the committee would probably have read. On page 19, if we move to the specific transactions that I was asked to deal with in detail, pre-purchase of coal in December 2015. The pre-purchase of coal was approved by the board via a board round-robin resolution, following a recommendation from the Investment and Finance Committee, which is a subcommittee of the board. The purchase of coal was the pre-purchase of coal was secured through the issue of a guarantee from APSA at the time. If we look at topic 3, prepayment to Tegeta for 659 million in April 2016 on page 26. This transaction was authorized by the board tender committee at its meeting on the 11th of April 2016. Me personally, I did not attend that meeting, nor was aware of the meeting taking place. I was requested to perform 3 actions relating to the transaction: negotiating a discount with Tegeta, obtaining adequate security for the pre-purchase, and ensuring that the transaction made commercial sense for Eskom. These things were duly performed, and the findings thereof was presented back to the board tender committee at its meeting on the 13th of April, which then authorized me to enter into a security agreement with Tegeta. The coal was delivered by Tegeta. This is the paragraph 146 that should have been between 106 and 105 and 106. And I requested internal audit to do a verification of the coal that was delivered by Tegeta, and they had issued a report with no exception. Topic 4, on page 29, the optimum coal penalty settlement. This was a settlement again that was approved by the board tender committee at its meeting on the 8th of February 2017, which is paragraph 116. The negotiations for the settlement followed an arbitration process, which is on paragraph 119 on page 30. Ms. Daniels was the Eskom official responsible for the negotiations at the time. Ms. Daniels believed that given the fact that she was negotiating the contract, it would not be appropriate for her to sign the very same contract, and therefore requested the board tender committee to delegate that authority to myself. That is on paragraphs 124 and 125 of page 30. On page 31, you will find that, again, given the high-profile nature of the transaction, I did some analysis of my own to understand what would a reasonable settlement amount be, and as you would see from analysis of Glencore financial statements, Optimum financial statements, some of the discussions with project managers at Eskom, it would seem that a 577 million rand settlement with Tegeta was appropriate. On page 32, topic 5, the relationship with McKinsey and Trillion. I think on McKinsey and Trillion, it's relatively quite a complex transaction, and to give some context in terms of my role in it, which is encapsulated, I think, in paragraph 135. The negotiations for the McKinsey Trillion contract and the approval thereof actually started way before I got to Eskom. So by and large, I inherited the program, I managed it, identified certain risks, and ultimately recommended to the board for its termination of the master services agreement, which is at paragraph 135 of page 32. In addition to that, on page 33, at paragraph 137, I requested an internal audit review relating to the procurement and contracting process to be conducted. The findings thereof is contained at paragraphs 210, 211, and 212. An external review to be conducted on the master services agreement relating to the value derived. This is the infamous Oliver Wyman report, which is included paragraphs 170, 171, and 172 of the statement. I also requested a legal review of the master services process to be conducted, and the findings thereof is contained at paragraphs 213 of the statement. If we look at the internal audit review and the report completed on 12 December 2015, which is at paragraph 211 of the statement on page 52. If we read the findings, the procurement process followed by Eskom to appoint McKinsey complied with applicable Eskom policies, processes, and procedures, and the National Treasury Guidelines, Instruction, and Practice Notes. The contracting with McKinsey followed Eskom policies, processes, and procedures, and National Guidelines, Instructions, and Practice Notes. We could not determine whether the contract was terminated in accordance with the termination clauses as contained in the contract, or was in fact terminated at all. We could not conclude whether the payments were in accordance with the settlement terms between Eskom and McKinsey, as no written settlement agreement signed by both parties were presented. If you look at the management comment on 212, basically that was effectively management saying that we will conclude a termination agreement with McKinsey, and that was concluded in February 2017. Paragraph 213 outlines our interactions with internal legal, which is Ms. Suzanne Daniels at the time. That is from paragraph 213 onwards of the statement. In and about August 2016, if we look at the table, before any progress payments were made to McKinsey and Trillion, I consulted with Ms. Daniels, who confirmed that the payments to Trillion, without a subcontract being in place, as this will be progress billing and the issues will be resolved when the termination agreement is put in place. This again was confirmed by Ms. Daniels in the draft Board Tender Committee submission of 8th December 2016 and the final Board Tender Committee submission of 12 December 2016. This was again confirmed by the internal audit report of 12 December 2016. Madam Chair, I think that would be all of the comments that I would like to make at this stage.
Thank you. Have you heard that? Oh.
The page number is page number 53, Honorable Member, and the paragraph reference is paragraph 213.
Advocate, over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Singh. Can you just for the record indicate to the committee what your academic and professional qualifications are?
My academic qualifications is I hold a bachelor's degree from the University of Durban-Westphal and a postgraduate diploma in finance as well from the University of Durban-Westphal. And my professional qualification is that I am I'm registered with SICA, so I'm a CASA or a chartered accountant.
Do you know Mr. Eric Wood? And if so, in what capacity?
I do confirm that I know Mr. Eric Wood. Mr. Eric Wood was a partner originally of Regiments.
I'm sorry, for some reason, I can hardly hear what he's saying. Can you please raise your voice?
I do confirm that I know Mr. Eric Wood. He was originally the partner or a member of Regiments Capital, and then later on was a partner, I think, in Trillion Capital.
How do you know Mr. Eric Wood? In other words, what is the relationship between yourself, if any, with Mr. Wood?
I first was introduced to Mr. Wood at Transnet, as at the time McKinsey was Regiments was a subcontractor to McKinsey, and that was my first meeting with Mr. Wood. Mr. Wood and I share a professional relationship. We do not have any other relationship. There's no personal relationship between Mr. Wood and myself. It was purely professional. He was a business advisor and a trusted business advisor.
Mr. Salim Essa, do you know him? And if so, how do you know him? And when did you get to know him?
Yes, Mr. Essa and I met on, I wouldn't say many occasions. I think it's probably 2 or 3 occasions. And the reason for our meetings were pretty much as a result of Mr. Essa seeking business opportunities, like most other meetings and interactions that I have with individuals. But they were relatively short, and I can't remember exactly when I would have been meeting Mr. Essa. But I think it was probably at my time at Transnet. In addition, I think I would probably want to add that for the time that Mr. Essa was at, or member or shareholder of Trillion, my interactions were solely with Mr. Wood at the time, or Dr. Wood at the time.
Mr. Vikash Saga, who was at McKinsey, do you know him? And if so, how do you know him, and when did you get to know him?
I do know Mr. Vikas Sagar. Mr. Vikas Sagar, as you quite correctly point out, is a partner, I think, at McKinsey & Company. My first interaction was with Mr. Sagar and McKinsey & Company in general was when I was at Transnet. That was my first meeting. Again, my relationship with Mr. Sagar is a professional one. Pretty much, again, a very trusted business advisor. Yeah, we don't have a personal relationship.
Dr. Weiss, who was also at McKinsey, do you know him? When did you get to know him, and what was the relationship, if any, that you had?
Dr. Weiss, yes, I do know Dr. Weiss as well. Dr. Weiss, I only got to know when I got to Eskom. Dr. Weiss, I think, served Eskom at the time. And so when I got to Eskom, that's when I had my exposure to Dr. Weiss. Again, Dr. Weiss and I shared a professional relationship. I don't think there was anything untoward to our relationship.
The directors of regiments, capital, whilst you were working at Transnet, other than Mr. Wood, which of the other two directors did you know, if any? And was there any professional or other relationship you had?
I think I had occasion to meet Lita, who was also one of the owners, I think, of regiments. I also had the occasion to meet Mr. Nivan Pillay, who was also one of the owners, I think, of regiments at the time. Due to the transactions that we undertook at Transnet, I did have an opportunity to actually interact with Nivan and work with Nivan. But again, my relationship with Nivan was purely professional. And as I said, Lita, I think I just met on one occasion or two occasions.
Any of the Gupta brothers that you know? And if so, what relationship, if any, you would have had with them?
The Gupta family, I wouldn't say that I have a relationship with, but I have met the Gupta family due to the business breakfasts and the TNA breakfasts that the Transnet and Eskom had sponsored at the time. But I don't have a personal relationship with them, but I have met with them, yes.
Over and above your academic and professional qualifications, and having served as now the finance director at Eskom, what would you say are the attributes of the finance director of a multi-billion company like Eskom?
I think the attributes are pretty much aligned to the outputs and functions associated with the position, and I think that has been outlined in my statement in terms of the roles that we have, that I have outlined in my statement.
Would honesty be one of those?
Yes, sir.
Would commitment to serving the company's interest would be one of those?
Agreed.
Would integrity be one of those?
Indeed, sir.
Did you, or were you, sometime in December of 2015 in Dubai and accommodated Oberoi Hotel?
Yes, I was, sir.
Who paid for the trip and the accommodation, all the expenses related to that travel?
Mr. Advocate Varana, it was not the Gupta family. It was actually a acquaintance of mine from the UAE, Mr. Al-Balushi.
Why would you say it was not the Gupta people? I mean, anybody could have paid for the trip, but why are you specific in saying it was not the Guptas?
Because it's widely rumored that the Gupta family paid for the trip, Mr. Advocate Varana. Also, I think the question was posed to me in July 2017 at the annual results presentation of Eskom, and the next day it was posed to me again on Morning Live of SABC, and my response to them then was, did you go? I said, yes, I did go. The question was then, did the Guptas pay? And I said, no, the Guptas did not pay. So my story has been consistent since then. And yes, and I think that has relatively plagued us quite significantly since then. Why that explanation was not accepted, I'm not too sure.
You are correct. 19 July 2017, when you guys released the financial results of Eskom, you were asked the question. And your response was you would prepare a dossier explaining all of that in 2 weeks' time. You will hand it to the board and to the Portfolio Committee on Public Enterprises, amongst others, and release it to the public. When I looked at your submission, I did not receive that explanation. Why is it missing?
There's a, I think
that's... Wait until I finish asking. The question is, why is it not in your submission? Or why was it not even submitted within 2 weeks as you promised?
Let's start with the 2 weeks, sir. I think at the time, there was an expectation for me to explain the transactions to, firstly, the board, and obviously to the minister. Subsequent to that, obviously, I was placed on special leave and then formally suspended. Obviously, that changes the complexion of the relationship between yourself and the company quite significantly. And up till today, after resignation, I still don't have any tangible charges that have been put to me associated with my suspension. So that was the reason why I did not submit anything to the board within 2 weeks as required. Secondly, I think the reason why we didn't cover it in the submission was because the topics that were requested for us to cover related to the 4 transactions that we were asked to prepare on.
The 2 weeks promise came voluntarily from you.
Yes, sir.
Forget about the request